Hi, thank you for attending this year's Stronger Memorials Wellness Fair for our employees. We've combined a booth as well as I'll be going over some narratives today to kind of educate the employees on the importance of some of the top preventable diseases in the United States as well as worldwide. I've created some slides which are behind me that you can see, as well as I'm going to just briefly talk to you about some comparisons of leading preventable diseases in the United States as well as worldwide. And also we're going to talk about the 7 dimensions of wellness and some ways in preventing some of the preventable diseases, actually reducing those. And when we talk about the potential preventable diseases, we've actually learned from the CDC that there are 5 what they call classified preventable diseases, and we'll talk about some of those today at our booth. One being, we all know that cancer is a top preventable disease, as well as respiratory disease, as well as unintentional diseases. And then we have heart disease. And we have cardiovascular disease. So, but we want to first talk about when we talk about preventable diseases and we talk about what is non-communicable. We want to know, first of all, what is non-communicable. And so when you hear me talk about non-communicable, it's really a non-infectious, a non-transmittable disease. You can't get cancer from someone, nor can a heart attack be transmitted. So these are basically developmental, genetic, and they are slow progressing. And they progress pretty much in a lot of our social, economic, in our region. It has a large part to do with the top preventable diseases. Also, what plays a risk is our behavior. Behavioral risk factors they contribute an overwhelming in deaths of non-communicable diseases, from lack of physical activity to unhealthy diets and the consumption of alcohol and tobacco use. These all play a role in when I talk about behavioral risk. There are many initiatives around the world to actually reduce these percentages of NCDs. And if you hear me speak in the term of NCDs, I'm referring to the non-communicable diseases. So now when we talk about non-communicable diseases, when we talk about the impact that is made on world in the United States, we're also going to talk about different regions across the world. And the impact is rapidly growing in the United States as well as worldwide. And it's affecting people of all ages and ranges and brackets. And it nearly takes up about 80% of deaths occur in low income to middle income in the United States and worldwide. And according to the WHO, if you hear me refer to WHO, this is a World Health Organization, which they do research and they actually do statistics based on preventable diseases. And WHO has done a research and said that the leading causes of these preventable diseases, the highest being cardiovascular, which has 17 million or 48% of deaths each year. And then cancer, which is 7.6 or 21%, 7.6 million or 21% of deaths occur each year. And respiratory, including COPD and asthma and chronic and pulmonary, is leading 4.2 million. And diabetes, it also causes about 1.3 million deaths a year. And then I mentioned a little bit about the behavioral risk factors, which this is about 85%, which stems from heart disease, which is overweight, lack of exercise, and obesity. One of the statistics did say that the deaths under 60 years old are so high, basically from these NDCs, and being the highest is really cardiovascular. So when we talk about cardiovascular, we want to really stress the importance of the things that accumulate or that slow buildup of cardiovascular, and one that it's caused by, of course, a disorder of the heart, and it's the blood vessels, and it leads to heart attack and strokes. And you hear people talk about raised blood pressure and hypertension. This is all leading from cardiovascular disease. And heart attacks and strokes are the major killers around the world. However, 80% of these could be prevented with just preventative care like diet and exercise, and eliminating tobacco use, and then we have 80% of premature heart attacks are preventable, like I said. And then overweight and obesity. This actually kills about 2.8 million people a year. And this also too can be prevented with just little small preventative measures. Now, when we get into what are those preventative measures, we know that medical screening would be your number one. And then implementing better eating habits, if possible. In some regions, this is very hard because there is not that food stores where you can actually have or eat better. And then things that like providing cost-effective treatments on those, who can afford it. But we want to try to provide that for everyone. And we want to add more fruits and vegetables to our diet. One of the other preventative diseases that I mentioned that's very high is cancer. Cancer, like heart disease, it can occur from lack of physical activity and obesity and poor diet, and also exposure to sun and also air pollution, which contributes to these factors. And cancer, while it doesn't pose a unique difference, it is that uncontrollable growth. These are typically grown from stem cells, and they actually break off, that actually cause and can metastasize in your body. These growth cells, they're categorized by stages. So when you hear people talk about it, they usually talk about it in a stage from a 1 to a 4. And some of the major deaths are lung, breast, stomach, colorectal, liver cancer. And when we want to talk about some of the preventative measures, when we talk about preventative measures, we want to talk about staying out of the sun or making sure that you protect yourself with sunscreen. Having regular pap smears. This could be essential with something that's very, very high on the radar, which is called HPV for men and women. And for women, this can actually be a preventative measure for cervical cancer. Early detection screenings. Like I said, the limited use of tobacco, the proper diet in all 4 food groups, exercising, and infant immunizations, which is really, really key in preventative measures, and reduce of exposed environments, staying out of places where you're exposed to high toxins and pollutants. And next we want to talk about, as we're talking about some of the top preventable diseases, we want to talk about chronic respiratory disease. Chronic respiratory disease, according to WHO, was estimated at 42% of deaths worldwide were related to chronic. This is largely due to secondhand smoke and smoking, period. And also, it involves a lot of children. Children live in a house with people, and they are actually accumulating the secondhand smoke, which leads to asthma, which asthma right now is the leading leading chronic disease among children. And the social determination also plays a role in this population. So, in low income areas, we do find that more children do have asthma. They stay in smaller houses, their parents both smoke, and the children typically we see more having chronic respiratory. And so when we talk about some ways that we can prevent this, of course, the number one thing is the exposure from tobacco smoke, avoiding the secondhand smoke, keeping your body free of pollutants. And believe it or not, washing your hands. It's very vital. We know that kids typically play with things and they put it in their mouth and then they are sick. And that is a key thing to prevention. Infections typically come from things that go in your mouth because you touch your face. So that is key in a preventative measure. So when we talk about some comparing and contrasting, just to give you an idea of how things are kind of grouped up, whether you're in this United States or whether you're in a whole other region of the world, when we talk about the cardiovascular survival rate, the rate in the United States is actually on the climb. It's dramatically high, but only in high income areas. Opposed to cardiovascular, worldwide is really having a low survival rate because it is predominantly in low income countries and it remains low. And by the time the disease is detected in some way, then it's really kind of late in that stage. And when we look at cancer, this too, the survival rate has improved, but typically when we did the research, it has improved in high income populations. Preventative screenings, you have insurance. Now you can actually get preventative measures are free with no cost under your insurance. And this is more so to a high to a middle income. Low to middle income survival rates remain low because and it's largely due to tobacco and alcohol and the use of diet. If you notice that when you are in a lower income area, whether it's the United States or it's worldwide, and I will get to that one in a second, that typically there are fast food restaurants on every corner because it's cheaper and it's easier, to afford, where you can go somewhere and get 10 pieces of chicken for, $9.99. Versus high income areas, they're going to have more so of your whole foods and they're going to actually pump, eating your kale and eating, taking better care of yourself. So when we look at cancer worldwide, we see that in low poverty countries, there is a very low success rate. And it remains detected at a later stage of the cancer. And it is one of the leading causes in Africa for women for cervical cancer. And then when we look at diabetes, this is the most people with diabetes in the United States are above retirement age and are in middle to high income areas. Well, when we look in developing countries and we look worldwide, it basically, when we looked at the people with diabetes, these people were actually under the age of retirement and they were all in a low income area. When we look at chronic respiratory, most common chronic respiratory disease comes from tobacco smoking, air pollution, and exposure to chemicals. And when we look at chronic respiratory in worldwide, more infants die due to respiratory disease in low poverty countries and contribute to over 90% of deaths in low to middle income countries. And in low income countries, inhalers are still not accessible. And so this really is a disparity in worldwide when you look at the advancements that are in the United States for children with asthma, where they can get an inhaler, but still in some developing countries, this is not even accessible. nor is it accessible for clean water in a lot of, developing countries, opposed to everywhere you go in the United States, you can get a bottled water. And then raised cholesterol, of course, is highest in high income families. More people eat out, less people eat at home. And in lower incomes or lower income countries, alcohol consumption is at an all-time high, which contributes to more deaths. And believe it or not, and it's in some high income countries worldwide, it's like a break off. It's kind of not really in the middle, but it's really high in high income and really high in low incomes. And then when we look at non-communicable diseases, as a comparison, we have several risk factors that determine the high prevalence in the United States and several risk factors that determine the high prevalence worldwide. So when we look at the prevalence in the United States, high income risk, the profile it includes less physical activity among women, raised cholesterol, and in middle and income profiles, we see majority, there's a high tobacco use among men, and there's obesity and overweight people. But then when we look at worldwide, the prevalence is about 30% of low to middle income people are dying under the age of 60. And this is accumulation of everything from respiratory to late detection of cancer to cardiovascular. And then nearly 80% of low-income population die of NCD deaths. And in low-income countries, they have limited access to oral care. They have limited access to foot care, so there are a lot of amputations. And in low income countries have a higher transmitting rate of viruses. And that's largely to do with actually having the proper vaccinations. So when we talk about all of the preventable diseases, we want to talk a little bit about wellness and how that wellness can really affect. So what are the 7 dimensions of wellness? And the 7 dimensions of wellness is environmental, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, occupational, and social. And when we talk about emotional, let's talk about emotional. This is more focusing on the ability to rely on your natural resources. Like, what is your self reward? And this plays a contribution to preventable diseases. And we look at emotional. Emotional wellness focuses on the ability of how well you control your stress, having the ability to trust. And then when we talk about your spiritual wellness, this is how you connect with religion, how you make sense of purpose and fulfillment within your life journey, and your direction or your religion and how you take that in. And then when we look at social, your social is really the ability to interact with other people in a positive way. You always want to feel loved and appreciated by others. Enter your physical. So, in your physical ability of wellness is really to maintain a level of a healthy body. How do you maintain having the proper nutrients that you can take in every day? Intellectual, this is the ability to learn, how well you are actually learning and actually taking in what you're learning, processing the information, and making sure that it's a personal growth for you, your family, within your career. And then you have your occupational. This is the ability to balance, basically internal and external, the rewards from working, how it promotes a sense of satisfaction. And so with all of that, we have to know how we can reduce stress. And some of the ways that, we want to for everyone to take away in this actual fair is the ways to reduce stress are awareness, assessment, knowledge, self-management skills, motivation, support and opportunity, and self-responsibility. And I won't go through every one of them, but the key is to being aware. Awareness is always number one, understanding the different options that might be available to you. And then once you understand them, you need to assess them. What kind of change can you make in your life? And then it comes that knowledge. What are you going to do to actually combat that preventable disease, and how it can impact in your life? And that goes to self-management, putting that knowledge into use and setting goals that are maintainable for you, and also changing the behavior. You don't really want to go around people that still have a behavior that every Friday night they're still going to go and have some fried chicken from the corner store when you need to do better. It's actual a behavior change, or being around somebody that smokes that might make you go right back to the thing that you're trying to change. And then last, we'll talk about just self-responsibility, holding yourself accountable. If you know that's a weakness of yours, then maybe joining a group and actually hanging around, someone different, but maybe just talking to that other person on the phone won't give you that sense of urge to do that and start really, really maintaining a different lifestyle. So another set of ways to reduce these preventable diseases or measures, of course, is diet, exercise, quitting smoking, and regular screenings of mammograms, colonoscopies, PAPs, foot exams, eye, and behavioral changes. So, in conclusion, we know that the United States is not the only country that is experiencing rapid growth in preventable diseases. These growth trends are found in developing countries as well as high poverty areas, as well as middle income, and they all share the same disparity. The power of prevention is really key, and some lifestyle changes will have to be made for the wellness of you and for the wellness of your family. So, in conclusion, I think putting the work in and educating yourself and letting go of some bad habits or distress will be the difference in a healthier, happy, and fulfilling life, and able to do some of the things that you want to do. So making small steps at this really, really has a longevity on reducing preventable diseases. Thank you.